Good morning to everyone. I hope that everything is functioning correctly, that you can see and hear me. Otherwise, I would see something in the chat, I suppose. So I'm not Alex Link. We're still having some technical issues, so I am hopping in and will ensure the first part of this third EDF Info Day. So welcome. As you know, Luxinnovation is the entity that is following you, the companies and the research organizations in Luxembourg, when you intend to participate in the EDF. And the next cycle of EDF is starting again, the 2023 call have been published 2 weeks ago, and so this EDF Info Day today will try its best bring some information to you, to researchers, to entities, to companies, to anybody who would be likely to participate in this year's EDF call. My name is Azilise Guérin. I am from the Defence Directorate and I'm the EDF national delegate for Luxembourg. So in the next couple of minutes, I will go through some key principles of the EDF participation that the Defence Directorate would like to bring near all the potential Luxembourgish entities that plan to participate in the EDF 2023 to better understand support you in this participation. Maybe I would add as an introductory a sentence. I'm sure that Alex would have had said something similar. That we are definitely seeing that there is a growing interest in defense from all of you guys since now 2021. Which is also the reason why we need to have this info day in as a complement to the Commission Info Day, which, by the way, will be organized this year, end of June, 28th and 29th of June, because this is also the occasion for Luxinnovation and for the Defence Directorate to explain to you how you can be supported by the whole Luxembourgish ecosystem in participating in the EDF. So first, my part will be focused on how the Defence Directorate can support you, and then I trust that Alex will jump in to give you some more information on how Luxinnovation, as the National Defence Industry Association, somehow will be able to support you in their turn. So let me start with a very brief summary or recap of what the EDF actually is. We may have some newcomers here in the audience today. So the EDF, what we have here, it's a financial instrument from the European Commission, which the EU budget, so it's taxpayers' money, it's your money, it's our money, which flows into this industrial program, which is supposed to support research and development activities by European companies. So the fund is divided into two. Oh, we have Alex in the house.
Yes,
Welcome,
good morning.
Alex. Should I just continue? Is that fine?
Yes.
Okay, so the EDF is divided into two windows. Basically, there is the research window and the development window. The main difference between those two windows is the funding. Actually, if you participate in the research window, then your project will, if it is selected, be funded 100% entirely by the European Commission, by the EDF, and there will not be any member state involvement in the project. The development part is little more tricky because the Commission would only fund between 20 and 80 and a maximum of 100% if you get some bonuses together. We will get back to this very shortly. If so, so there is no systematic overall coverage of of your project costs, which means that the extra amount of money needs to be found somewhere else and brought in, which is most of the cases. In most of the cases, the member states that bring this additional extra funding, which is why we are speaking of co-funding. So research project, you can do it on your own. You don't need member state support, at least not from the Ministry of Defense. The Commission is funding the whole overall eligible cost of your project, and development project is a co-funding between the Commission and the Ministry of Defense in every member state, of course. So the overall budget is 8 billion. Idea that will make approximately 1.1 billion, which is planned up per year, which will flow every year in your research and development. Of course, it's not. I mean, it's a start. It's the first time we have that kind of a program. So it's of course not enough to fund all the interesting projects that are submitted in the EDF. It's supposed to be a start, and it's supposed to also be a way to incentivize and to maybe bring European companies and European member states to cooperate more. And so if we manage to do this, then of course the Commission will most probably put extra funds in this in the upcoming years. Maybe a last point interesting for Luxembourgish entities is that the EDF has a whole SME fetish, which means that there is an SME bonus. Very easy. The more SMEs there is in a consortium, this consortium can get for the funding. And on the other hand, there is an SME dedicated category, which will enable you to team up with only SMEs. So you will basically evade or outside of the competition that will be brought by all the primes. So you will not have to compete against Airbus and Thales and Rheinmetall. It's an specific category, which is quite of interest for Luxembourg, we suppose. Let's go over to this. I know the slide is very difficult to read. It wasn't necessarily intended to be read by you. I see that there are interruptions. From Sidat Kara. Are there more interruptions for other people? Or is it just Sidat? Okay. Unless other messages come, I will just pursue. So this slide, yes. Okay. Let's go on. I hope the interruptions are not too messing up, a bit choppy. Okay. Probably it's my connection, I guess. I hope it's fine. Just continue for now. This slide you see in front of you, it's just to show you the structure of the 2023 calls for proposals. You see on the very left, keywords, you will have the ID of the calls for proposals. So it's basically RA for research action, it's DA for development action, it's RDIS for disruptive research activities, and you have SMERO, which is for SMEs and research organizations, and so on. So this already gives you a hint on whether you are eligible or whether what nature this call is. And then you'll have the complete ID, you'll have the topic and the budget allocated. If we go to the next slide, it's exactly the same information, but just in a different configuration. And this slide is just to have a more clear focus on what exactly the topics in this year's calls for proposal will focus on, whether they development and the budget dedicated. Now, this slide is probably the most interesting for you because it's the slide that shows you the Luxembourg priorities in defense, at least for this year's. So Of course, you know, Luxembourg's priorities in defense have evolved very much over the last years. We have this huge focus on space, on cyber, nothing new to you. But what you need to know is that there are also other topics that may be of interest to us, which are those in straight lines, the straight red lines, which are topics, which means that if you come up with a project proposal in those topics, this will definitely consider internally. We will have a look whether it fits with of course, with budgets, if it fits with activities that are ongoing, maybe future activities. If we know that your topic, your project proposal tackles a specific topic that we intend to work on in 1 or 2 years' time, then definitely it will be of interest for us. And the dashes are topics that are not necessarily in our focus, but which we could definitely have a look at. Of course, those that are not in a red box means that we can unfortunately not co-fund them or support them, because obviously Luxembourg does not yet have a defense or a maritime force. So this is completely out of scope for now. Let's go on to this slide. So this slide is basically, it's just to show you how the funding mechanisms work. So it's if you participate in a research action, then you will be funded 100% by the Commission, provided that your project is selected. Of course, it's a competitive industrial program, so the best projects and the worst fail. A research action requires no member state co-funding. So again, you can do whatever you want as long as it's research. You can really go straight forward, go for it, and try your luck. When it comes to development actions, you will most probably need some member state co-funding support, which is why you will be called or invited to let us know as soon as possible on your, because as you can see here, let's take a prototyping a project, which is the one with the fewest, with the most, with the smallest funding from the European Union, which is 20%. In case you make it with the bonuses, with the SME bonus and so on, you can go up to 55%, which means you need to bring 45% of the costs of the funding for your project. So you can either bring it yourself if you find a very offering and a very gentle consortium member that says, hey, I'm going to provide this. Okay, no issue. You can also divide it among yourselves, but you can also ask the member states that are involved in the project to co-fund, and this is what will happen most likely. So to have these 45% co-funding, of course, you need to inform your member states that you intend to participate in this project. We will have to look at it internally, see whether it is of interest to us, because we cannot co-fund every project. We have to make a choice on those that have the most interest for us as an MOD, and it has to be of link, of course, to with activities that we fulfill, that we undergo. This slide looks terribly fuzzy. Sorry for this, but you will see it's very straightforward. This is an information that we really want you to be very careful about. We, as the Defence Directorate, of course. There is two ways to participate in a EDF project. You can either be a member of consortium, which means you have been invited to participate in the project. Let's say Airbus calls you, says, hey, we want you. This is one option. Or you can team up with other companies and identify among these companies one company that will be the coordinator, basically the lead company of the consortium, which still makes you a member of the consortium with no overall responsibility. The only thing that you will have to ensure work your interaction with the other members of the consortium, and request your MOD to provide eventually, like really, sometimes you need sometimes you don't. It's on a voluntary basis to need to provide some documents, or funding. I mean, it's if you obviously need funding from your member state, then you will have to liaise this with your MOD, but nothing else. I mean, as a member of consortium, if you happen to be a lead entity, a lot, because not only will you be responsible for the whole organization of the project proposal, which means that you will have to organize the project itself, you will have to manage the consortium, see who will do what in the consortium, work on the work packages, you will have to establish the financial figures, will pay what for what, when, and how, and of course be responsible of the project proposal submission. And usually the primes are the ones that take on this role, but definitely an SME or you can take this role as a lead entity in a consortium. There is no constraints other than this will require, of course, a lot amount of time and also maybe money from you. But maybe the most important is that even if technically you could take on the lead, I'm afraid practically it will be very difficult, because this will automatically the MOD to ensure and lead MOD, because while you will be liaising with your consortium to organize everything, your MOD will implicitly take the role of the lead MOD. This is written nowhere, but has been established for more than 4 years now with the EDIDP, the program before the EDF already, which will require us, technically, the Luxembourg MOD, to liaise with all the other MODs, sure that they have their signatures in time, to ensure that they have their funding in time, that to ensure that they will not we participate and then in the last minute they will just jump off, which will create a huge issue for the whole project. So this is a huge task for MODs, and which requires resources and time we do not necessarily have. So we do not want to be completely negative and pessimistic, but we would definitely invite you to let us know. Interruption, I had the feeling. So we would definitely invite you to let us know as soon as you intend to take the lead of a project. Let us know so that we can tell you whether yes or no we can support you or not. This is important. And now the last information slide, which is, well, kind of basically a recap. If you're planning to participate in a development project, please don't forget to inform us as soon as possible, because we will have to statute about your project. We will have to say whether we support it, whether we can co-fund it. This is a heavy process. We need the minister to sign off everything in this regard, and also let Luxinnovation know early as well, because Luxinnovation will be able to help you secure the consortium spots and find some more partners and so on. So the message here is, whenever you want to participate in an EDF topic or a project, let us know, Luxinnovation and the Defence Directorate. We will be able to support you. And maybe the last more very important information here is, of course, we will undergo a selection process in the MOD to see whether we can support you and co-fund your project, development project. But we simply cannot fund everything. So we may have 20 or 30 project proposals, of which maybe only 10 will be selected, because only 10 really fits into our project priorities, into our defense priorities, or it's simply because we only have funding for 10 projects. It can be more, it can be less. So that does not mean that your project is not good, that it is not worth it, and that you should let it go and not try to put it into the EDF 23. To the contrary, our support may be, of course, of a big help in the weight, also in the evaluation by the Commission for your project. But it doesn't mean that if we're not on it, that you will lose the project. So still, have it a go with your consortium. Have a look whether you can find another way of funding your part. Maybe you can bring the funding, as in the case for a project last year. Maybe the consortium can bring the funding. Do not abandon your initiative just because we could not support you. This is very important, and we will always be there to answer any questions anyways. So now for the last slide, for the way forward, I think the most now the 3 or 4 most important deadlines would be that would invite you to let us know by end of May only your intention of if you intend to participate on a topic, and if yes, which topic this is. Then for a month later, we will need to have the one pager, which already used to be which was circulated last year already, and which Alex Link will best tell you about. Just before the summer break, 14th of July will be the deadline for you to confirm whether you are in a consortium and to provide some extra additional documents. In general, these documents are some project descriptions that we need for our experts to know whether we will or not. This is how we will proceed this year. I have been through everything, but of course I remain at your disposal. I hope it was somehow clear, and I give over to Alex, who will have the more industrial perspective now for you. Thank you very much. We cannot hear you, Alex. But we do see your slides. Oh, maybe in the meantime, I can answer the questions indeed. So, François Mazière asks whether there can be a case where LuxMOD shows the interest for the entity to participate in a development project, however, does not support the co-funding. This is a good question. Technically, yes, can have a strong interest for a project and say and sign a letter of intent, for instance, which will also be mandatory in the frame of development projects. Sign the letter of intent and say, we support this project, we intend to procure the final product when it's finished in 5, 10, 15 years, which is a chèque blanc. It's something that is not really concrete, but it's something that the insists on because it gives the commission an idea of how many member states really truly support the idea, because obviously it's taxpayers' money, so there's no interest in giving taxpayers' money to a project which is of no anybody. So this is it. So technically, yes, we could support the project with an LOI, but which would really help you with the co-funding that you will need to bring into. But yes, technically it's possible. Next question, maybe for companies owned by foreign groups. National guarantees. In fact, the national guarantees, Alex, I think we hear you now, but I will maybe just
Yes.
finish on this point. Yes, so if you are not an EU-owned a company, normally rules is you cannot participate unless you provide a guarantee which is provided by the member state that you're based in. This is something that we have not yet set up in Lux. We are working on it. So I'm not sure, speaking under Alex control, I'm not sure this will be ready for this year's. Unfortunately, it has huge political implications. For now, the only countries that have done this are those that are really France, Germany, Italy, but not necessarily the a political implication. This is something that needs to be checked with more minister, but probably it will be settled for next year. And the last question: are there any requirements on typical cross-nationality multinational for a consortium? Of course, there is. Stupid me! I forgot to say this in the first. The main eligibility criteria for EDF for to be eligible is to be formed by 3 companies coming from 3 different member states. So no, of course you won't have Airbus France teaming up with Airbus Germany and having a daughter company of Airbus in Czechia. It will be 3 completely independent companies teaming up from 3 different member states. And of course, the more entities you are, the more weight you have for the commission. This is obvious. And maybe I'll take is there a constraint for what company to form consortium? I think this is with the last question, with the last answer I gave. There's no constraints. You just need to be 3 entities. Thank you very much, Alex. Over to you.
Thank you, Azelis. And sorry again for the issues we had on the tech side. I think it should now be all right, and I hope you can all hear me loud and clearly. So yeah, thanks again to Azelis. I think it was a good overview, and as you know, Azelis is the national delegate in the program committee of the European Defence Fund, and therefore we are very glad that we can collaborate on this. We will then jump over on my presentation, and also after my presentation there will also be an important testimonial by LuxGovSat and Gerald Schlüter, which will provide some hints on how to approach the EDF call for proposals, but also to have a strategic multi-annual approach when it comes to EDF. So, can you see my slides? Yeah? Yes, perfect. Thank you. Okay. So before going more into the details of the European Defence Fund, I would just like to take one step back to provide you basically with an overview of all the initiatives where we are currently involved as part of our partnership with the Luxembourg Directorate of Defence. So we had actually 2 months ago at the Benelux Space for Defence event a renewal of our partnership, and we are very happy and honored that we can have this mandate again to support the Luxembourg Directorate of Defence to integrate and to support the efforts in integrating the Luxembourg industry into the European defence value chain. And as you can see on the slide, it's currently concerning 4 different initiatives. So some of you might have known or might have participated even to the Joint Defence Call that we launched last year together with the Ministry of Economy, the Ministry of Research and Education, the National Research Fund, and the Director of Defence. Luxinnovation was working as the coordinator of the call, and this course had as objective to fund, develop dual-use technologies in space and lightweight materials, and was also meant to give a first possibility to our Luxembourg Industry and Research to have a funding contract with the Luxembourg Directorate of Defence, national only. But the next step of this was then to really go for the European initiatives, where you will find also all the other MODs and potential clients. So basically here we are talking about the European Defence Agency, where we are active in 15 CapTech, so Capability Technology working groups. So these are groups where to define capability technology projects that will eventually be funded by the MODs in the interest of EU defense. And we have also the fear of the European Commission, which is the European Defence Fund, to fund big capability development projects, again, in view of fulfilling the EU defense capability needs. Besides this, there's also the NATO, so NATO investment programs, NATO acceleration, and of course, which, as you can probably imagine, are the ones where most of the budget goes. And this is also from our perspective really where we want to bring our industry. So we have on the European level R&D programs, which can really go up to TRL levels 9, where we really want to make sure that our Luxembourg industry gets the necessary baggage in order to be sufficiently qualified then for NATO's procurement programs. And that's where we want to see ultimately our Luxembourg industry. When you look now at the European Defence Capability Initiatives, so EDF is certainly the key one. So when it comes to European Defence Fund, it's really about exploring opportunities both in R&D and commercial, because the European Defence Fund can help you to develop new know-how and technological capabilities that are in the interest of the EU defense. So looking at the initiatives that are supported by the Luxembourg Directorate of Defence, I mentioned the Joint Defence Call, which is only focusing on national level, which has smaller budgets, basically, which can be from 500K to 2.5 million euros. Then we bring it up to the next level, where also the number of member states can actually be bigger, and you have more support, so the projects will be bigger. And this is typically projects between 3 and 10 million projects, but ultimately this all leads up to the European Defence Fund, where we really have these big capability projects. And this is also to be considered from a multi-annual approach, because by 2027, everything which will be developed within the European Defence Fund is meant to be an operational capacity to be used by the member states and the MODs of the European Union. So as such, as you can see, there's really a multiple layer to this. And for us, it's very important that you see the European Defence Fund as a long-term objectives, where it's about international cooperation and maximizing also the support of the member states. Now, what is the rationale for the European Defence Fund for the Luxembourg Industry and Research? Now, there can be many reasons why you should participate to the European Defence Fund. First one is certainly that you have a technology or know-how or capabilities that are of interest for the Luxembourg and also for the EU defense. And what can also be said is that there's more and more, and you will see it in the call topics, there's more and more a focus on civil technology spin-in from other sectors, from space, from civil, and I think the synergies plan really to make sure that all these technologies can also be used in the different sectors is key. Then, of course, defense, EU defense is a way to innovate, to diversify, and again, explore new markets. And of course, if you want to collaborate with European Ministers of Defense, prime contractors, and European industry in order to develop future EU defense capabilities, then the European Defence Fund is exactly the right program to target. So what is the main challenge for you? It's well, to convince the European Ministries of Defense, to convince the prime contractors, and to convince, of course, the European industry, since it's about international collaboration. And therefore, you will see in the next slide, there's many steps that you need to consider, but most importantly, and I think as it is mentioned as well, you have in Luxembourg a national ecosystem that supports you in this process. Luxinnovation as industry expert in support of the Luxembourg Directorate of Defence and the Directorate of Defence as a delegate in all these programs will support you in this process. And as such, if you do, let's say, the biggest challenge on your side, which consists in integrating a consortium and obtaining the support of other member states, then the chances are very high that you will also get the support of the Luxembourg Directorate of Defence, of course, if it applies also to priority capability technology domains of Luxembourg. So here we have the slide, which is now the most important, let's say, for you in the next months. So as you can see, it's a timeline basically over 8 months between the launch of the EDF call for proposals and a submission deadline in November. So you have 8 months to create your consortium, to elaborate a project, to negotiate the work package, the budget and the IPR, and to get the support of the member states. And as you can see, we defined it in 4 steps. So the most important one is, of course, that you identify potential partners for future EDF projects. And ideally, you do this already before the actual launch of the EDF call for proposals. Now, this may sound a bit tricky, but here we are actually making reference to this multi-annual perspective of the European Defence Fund. It has been defined what should be an operational capacity by 2027, and therefore everything which has been defined within the European Defence Fund as research or development action shall ultimately go into this direction. And this is also something we used to have a more structured approach between, for instance, the Benelux, where we had the Benelux Space for Defense Industry Day, both with the national armaments directors from the countries, the EDA, and the European Commission DG Defense, where they presented the different collaboration opportunities for the three nations. So this is already a way to identify partners in strategic areas for the three countries in order then to establish potentially together projects in the frame of the EDF. So this identification of potential project partners is something that you can do all along the year through various networks and initiatives, and there will also be a dedicated slide for that. But let's now come back to the EDF call for proposals 2023. So we are now in the phase where the call has been launched. So you will quickly be required to go into the next phase where you need to convince the EU industry and prime contractors to integrate existing consortia or to attract partners for your own projects. And this is also the phase where you will see that there's a lot of events planned together with the EU industry, but also with member states and MODs, where we can actually help you to better define and make your projects mature. Some of these events is the Paris Air Show, the Le Bourget, in the end of June, where we will actually have several B2B matchmakings with allied member states, with MODs, but also national defense industry associations. These are all key people and key organizations that we need to address if we want to get the necessary support for the EDF. So once we come to July, I think, as it is mentioned it, we would like from your side to be as clear already as possible to whether you would like to go for the EDF project or not, because following July, it will be the phases where on one side you will have to negotiate the work packages, the concrete budgets and the property rights with your consortium partners, but parallelly you will also potentially seek the support of the member states, and this can be in different forms. It can be letter of intent, letter of support, or even a financial support by the member states. And there we need indeed to have a maximum of information, or the DoD needs to have this information in order to make sure that they can potentially support you. And I will get back to this in one of the next slides. So as you can imagine, the first important step is, of course, to identify the relevant topics for you and what are the key players to get in touch with. And here, the most important source of information is the call text. So here you will have already a detailed description of what is actually planned. The first thing you need to do is check whether it's a research or development action. If it's a development action, there is usually a research project which has been done or developed in one of the precursor programs. So there's the EDIDP, the PRDR, but there's of course also the first call of proposal of the EDF, where some of the project might actually be finished within the next year, and then you can here actually have a follow-up project. Therefore, really go into the detail of the text. What you will also see is there's an indicative budget. If we take the example of this development action for space situational awareness, we have a budget of 100 million euros. It's also indicated that it will be only one proposal that can be funded. Therefore, it's very clear. In this case, you need to make sure to understand what was the precursor project, who were the coordinators, and this is all information that you can actually find publicly. And then it's up to you, and also through our networks, to get in contact with these coordinators and convince them. Other documents which will be relevant is the EDF indicative multiannual perspective, which I mentioned before. So if you see that for the EDF call 2023, the topics that are of interest for you are not directly addressed, you might have a look in the 2024-2025 subjects so that you can already prepare in your networks future collaborative projects. And then you will also see that both on the FRS side and the Commission side, you get access to the results and the winning consortia. Now, then just for the next step, and I think this is important, you need, in order to identify all these partners, we have already a lot of existing networks and initiatives, so please valorize them, because whether it's in defense, in space, or civil, it's most of the time the same actors. And therefore, I would just like to give an overview of all these different matchmaking possibilities that will come up in the next months. I would just like to start again with the Benelux Industry cooperation that we are currently setting up, which is concerning cyber and space defense and also NATO. So I mentioned the Benelux Space for Defense Industry Days, which took place on the 23rd of February, and which will be done again in the frame of the Paris Air Show. So this is a very good occasion to present Benelux collaborative projects, possibly then also in front of the national armaments directors to already have a preliminary backup by them. There's also the NATO Benelux Industry Day, which will take place on the 2nd of June. Even though this is not targeting EU defense, the actors and industry players that you will find there will also be potential candidates for an EDF project. Then another important network is, of course, the European Defence Agency's Capability Technology Working Group, so these CapTechs meetings, just to mention some of them: space, cyber, materials, energy and environment, land systems, air. Basically, you have in the European Defence Agency all domains which are also relevant for the European Defence Fund. And these are excellent networks where you can talk both to MODs and industry players, which are probably also preparing EDF projects. And therefore, please also use this. All these meetings will happen in June. And I would particularly like to stress out that the Space CapTech and the Cyber CapTech meetings will take place in Luxembourg on the 15th to 7th of June and on the 29th and 30th of June. Then there's a lot of thematic international fairs. So we just were last week on the International Cybersecurity Forum with a large industry delegation, also composed of 30 companies and research organizations. So this was a perfect momentum also, since we had a lot of B2B matchmakings with allied member states, with industry and defense associations. And there again, you could already initiate discussions with potential partners. The same goes for instance, energy and environment, where we'll have the International Forum for Circularity in European Defense in Madrid on the 15th of May. And there's also the Space and Air Conference, which I mentioned before, the Paris Air Show on the 19th to 25th of June. These are all dual use, civil military conferences, but there's also conferences dedicated just to defense, to EU defense. So there's the events of the European Defence Agency, the European Defence Innovation Days, which will take place on the 30th of May and the 1st of June. So Luxembourg will have a booth there, and it will again be a good possibility to exchange both with representatives of the DG Defense, but also of high-level representatives of the EU defense. And the same goes for the EDF Info and Networking Days, which will take place on the 15th of June in Brussels. Then two last informations. With Luxinnovation, we are part of the National Focal Point Network, which is the support group for the Ministries of Defense within the European Defence Fund. You can access all these contact points within the link that you will find here. But there's also very relevant network that we are exchanging with is the National Defence Industry Associations, which are collaborating also very strongly with the MODs, and where there will be many B2B matchmakings opportunities within the next months. And then last but not least, I want to stress again out that the civil and space networks are as much important as are the ones that I just mentioned. So whatever contacts that you have in Northern Europe or in European Space Agency networks might also be very relevant. Then just one last slide before giving over to Gerald. As Elise mentioned, it's for us very important to be informed as soon as possible so that we can also make the necessary support actions within our networks. So please inform us by end of May about your intention to go for one of the call for proposals. The next step would then indeed be to have an as much detailed as possible description of your project. And there we have developed a one-pager project template that you can request at Luxinnovation. So this should cover the call that you want to address. The project title here, we take a fictive one, Circular Technology in Space Defense. It should address which kind of activities you want to deal with, a short description of the project with the planned developments, the innovation and the defense capability gaps that you want to address. Most important also is also the timeline, what are the different phases where you will be implicated in, and also the TRL levels that you want to target. Then a quick overview of the different companies and entities or research organizations that shall be part of the consortium. Again, the eligible actions according to the EDF regulation. And I think this is also important then the work packages, because you might eventually just end up in contributing to one specific or two specific work packages. And for us, it's very important then to understand where you might actually be able to take the lead. And then just one last information, which is very important for the DoD, is to provide an overview of the budget, because they might potentially be able then to co-fund the entirely rest of the co-funding needs on your side. So this would be all on my side. I hope it was all understandable. If there are any questions, you're of course very welcome to put them in the chat, or to contact me afterwards for any further investigations. And with this, then I would like to give over to Gerald, and thanks again for your patience.
Yes, so good morning to all. Can you hear me? Just cross-check.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, quite elaborately here by Asilis and Alexander before, I would like to provide here an update on our experiences working on these kind of programs. Been involved for some years in these activities, and I will present you two pages with our experiences, with our takeaways, especially in the context of the multi-annual approach as introduced by Alexander before. So, how can you do this? Here we go. Okay, so as a quick wrap up of, now I lost the page. That's small. Now big again. So LuxGovSat, we are here based in Betzdorf, Luxembourg, as being a joint venture between the SES, satellite operator here located, and the Luxembourg government. So we are in the secure communication domain based on the satellite, the asset 2018. And as part of our work areas, basically, we are looking as well into the EDIDP. So EDIDP was, in the end, the predecessor of the EDF program, which we basically looked upon in 2019 and found it quite interesting. Involved basically to widen our exposure to bring us in the quarters programs a bit better than in the past, to make some developments going forward. So we mentioned, so we are as the satellite operator looking into these activity elements. So the domains what we have been so far, especially looking into, has been the information security domain, and of course, as a space segment, the space category. So these are the prime areas where we basically bring in our skills, our expertise, and where we see in general our assets are most beneficial. The other consortial partners, but as well coming back to us, coming back to Luxembourg in terms of what kind of developments basically we can leverage then going forward in the future. So the first call, which we have been successfully engaging in, was the EDIDP 2019, and the call was called the European Strategic Command and Control System to Tactical Level. And that's a new command and control system which the EU employ quite some timely in the end, given today's geopolitical situation. And from LuxGovSat side, basically, as listed above from our link to the consortium partners, basically the SATCOM expertise and the SATCOM capabilities. It has a total and planned duration of 30 months. It was the award was received in July 2020, and since December 2020, we are basically operationally in the project. It's a multinational activity with 16 participants from 10 different EU. And there's a link to as well to the PESCO domain here, which is the elements what Asilis was mentioning before in terms of getting some percentage in terms of funding. The budget allocation in total of this project, in total, everything together for all these companies together, 2 million, out of which 20 million are coming from the EU as the maximum EU contribution. Of activities what we are covering here basically are right now our feasibility, study and design. So that's the core of the project. The second part has been successfully being in the EDF framework, which we then have been engaging in a 2021 timeframe, especially in this timeline, what also Alex was mentioning before, ramp up of the activity in May and so on, going forward, submission then in the so that's a more space-related activity. PIN protected waveform, combining technology for resilient satellite communication against jamming. The project timeline here is 39 months, and the award we received in July. And after the award reception, in the end, there has been quite some project ramp activities. Also, the final exchange with the European Commission, which are typically required. 23. Here is the coordinator of SD Engineering in Belgium, and in the call in the project coming from 12 different EU member states. Budget allocation total 30 million. 25 million are from EU contribution. Like the one above, the main scope of the activity is feasibility study and design. Of course, we are not in another where we basically have been as well part of it and submitted in November. Expect the feedback from July 20 this year. Of course, following some weeks ago, we are looking now, as stipulated by Alexander, we are into the options, which and what call option might be of interest for us going forward until the autumn. Leading, we need to into another call contribution. And that's coming to the next page. So what kind of lessons learned do we have? So overall, the main topic as well, the annual dimension is getting certainly, let's say, these design activities, of course, having more and more interest to have going development and implementation projects going forward. And then thereafter, of course, potentially going into some kind of procurement. We always see that a very close interaction. Innovation is really fundamental to align basically on the Luxembourgish interests and what kind of support options are available. So this, of course, the early networking, participation to EDF and so on are all beneficial to broaden the base on the network. At the end of the day, it's always coming to the factor who knows who, and what kind of company focus can be provided. On a long-term perspective, there's this the EDA CapTech programs, which are now and are getting more and more interest as well from us to look into understanding what are upcoming developments in the future or upcoming areas of interest for the EDF framework in the future. Because in the end, as we see. Then from a hands-on perspective, yes, end of Q1, beginning of Q2, we need to have this available. We need to watch the interests and we need to check which kind of resources are available. These projects, we have to get the go on the partnerships. Was mentioned before,
for the bonus and for the points, it's always good to have a good mix of larger and smaller companies and support from the. That's the most beneficial setup, as we see. The work program that definitely needs to have certain care about the definitions of the role, the scope, and the. As you can see, the project consortia we are in of companies being involved. The project management is a huge task, and all these associated efforts need to be carefully judged. It's not typically it's more than a person, which one FTE job which is required to master all these management. As well, then a kind of category can be said.
Efforts, what are the other
direct or
the regime and the indirect costs?
All these elements need to be discussed well in advance of this. Then kind of an ongoing the reporting are quite elaborate.
So all these financial reporting,
project reporting, wird certainly based. All needs to be very detailed and basically
needs to be handled with appropriate attention.
Based on the needs of the EDF framework, also what we can see, security elements, classification of programs require more and more effort on the participants.
Clearance,
personal clearance, site
setup of the respective
IT environment, setup of the respective processes to be adherent to all these security aspect letters elements. There can be substantial elements. I think this we can certainly we can share. And that, I think that's it from on the EU programs, and I'm looking forward to have more Luxembourgish participants framework.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Gernot. So I saw that some people had some issues with the sound. So we are very sorry for that. I hope for that all together you still could have a good overview of the different lessons learned from GovSat. I think they have really a lot of experience in that, and also looking really at this multi-annual perspective is quite very important to consider. And such, I would like to invite now Gerald and Aziz also back on the floor. If you have any questions, now is the moment to put them in the chat. And we'll just give you maybe one minute to write them down. I would just also like to point out that at the moment, programs, so during the European Defence Fund network days, you will also have dedicated presentations by the DG Defense and the different employees, and they will really go into the details of each of the project proposal steps. And this will also be a very good occasion for you then to be on site to network with the different EU industry companies and research institutes.
I see a comment regarding my sound. I only checking there's an high. Which might
explain
the problems on my side.
Okay, I see no other questions, so I just want to ask if Gerald, you want to add anything else, or Azilis, we can have a last message to our audience. Azilis, you want to start? Or Gerald?
Yes, hello back. Is it okay? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So mot de la fin. I hadn't planned this, but I think anything we can really strongly invite you to do, us as the Defence Directorate, and I think I can also speak for Alex and Luxinnovation, is I think it's, yeah, was there an interruption? When it's interrupting, is really encourage you. So first thing is to actually encourage try and participate in the EDF. We totally understand that it's that it can be a little. Can you hear me or?
I can hear you well. Yeah.
Okay, because I have my screen, it freezes, and I'm not sure whether there is an interrupting or not. Is to encourage you to actually try. We know that the EDF is it looks like a huge machine that if you're not already well established in the defense sector, you may not have any chance, and that's the image that sometimes it may have on SMEs or even researchers or research organization. But the way the EDF was set up was specifically to give a chance to also the SMEs, and also research organizations. So we've seen also in the past 2 years that it works. We have had some success stories in Luxembourg for EDF 21. We're now desperate for EDF results for 22, in which we have quite a bunch of Luxembourgish participation in proposals, and so it is completely possible. There is no one who is too small for the EDF, but of course the key here will be for you to unfortunately do your job as a private company, which means do your network with the right people, and if you need support with regards to this, then there is Alex there to help you. And if you need support from the MOD for development projects, if you have any question on how the funding now, how is this actually going, then feel free to reach out. And don't forget that the Commission also is there to answer questions, not only on the info day. And actually, the info day is probably the day where she answers less to questions because the program is quite full. But there is that you can find on the website of DG Defis. All the documents, as was said, are online with all the information specifically for companies to understand how to proceed. So really, there is support from all the sides. Use it, and we will help wherever we can. That's all I can say.
Okay, thank you, Aziz. I see also that now we have reached also the end time of the session. So thanks again to all of you which were present today. Thanks to you, Aziz, and thanks to Gerhard. And yeah, please let us know about your project ideas. We are there to support you, and we're looking very much forward to collaboration. So have a good day, and see you soon.